Olympics and she's going to do it. And the record stood for 19 years, and they put an 8/11 ounce on one side, an 8/11 ounce on the other.
Washington, D.C. has hosted presidents, foreign dignitaries, and enough political drama to fill a decade of headlines. But nobody quite expected the loudest reception of the week to belong to a 21-year-old from the Philippines carrying a tennis racket instead of a briefcase. Somehow the city, a packed WTA 500 draw, and the name Alexandra Eala have all ended up tangled together in the same story, leaving people online arguing whether what they're watching is a pure sports moment, a cultural celebration, or something closer to a plot twist from an inspiring drama. And whatever it actually is, one thing feels certain. Whatever happens next could reshape the entire trajectory of her young career. Just days earlier, this same young woman had walked off center court at Wimbledon after a valiant battle, having already taken down the reigning champion Iga Swiatek in one of the biggest upsets of the tournament. If you're only now hearing her name, you're about to understand why so many people can't stop talking about her. Alexandra Eala just became the first player from the Philippines to ever reach the fourth round of a Grand Slam singles draw. That alone would be a career-defining sentence for most players. Except for her, it's starting to look like a footnote in a much bigger story. Some athletes show up to a tournament with nothing more than their bags and their nerves. Others show up carrying something far heavier. Eala walked into the American capital carrying the hopes of an entire nation on her shoulders, along with a fan base that seems to be growing by the week. When people who cover this sport for a living start talking about her, there's a noticeable shift in tone, a kind of surprised excitement, because the clips and coverage about her keep pulling in numbers nobody quite expected. The answer isn't complicated. The Philippines simply hasn't had a tennis star like this before. Not someone who was a junior world number one. Not someone training under the same roof that produced Rafael Nadal. Not someone who has already beaten a former Grand Slam champion on the biggest stage. That combination of talent, backstory, and timing is exactly the kind of thing that turns a regular WTA 500 event into the center of attention. Just to add another layer to an already wild week, high-profile figures publicly welcomed her to Washington, instantly turning what should have been a straightforward tennis story into a cultural moment that spilled far outside the lines of the sport. Back home, the reaction has been enormous. People glued to broadcasts, families crowding around televisions, social feeds flooded with clips of her matches. For an entire country, watching her compete has become something close to a shared national event. Rewind just a few days before Washington, and you'll find her walking off Wimbledon's grounds after a heartbreaking loss to Jasmine Paolini. A defeat that clearly stung. But the crowd's reaction told a completely different story than the scoreline did. Spectators rose to their feet, not out of pity, but out of recognition. They understood they hadn't just watched a promising young player lose a tough match. They had watched someone announce herself as one of the most exciting rising stars in the sport. Here's the part that makes her story so compelling. Most players in that position would take the week to recover physically and mentally. But Eala didn't do that. She boarded a flight almost immediately, landed in Washington, and walked straight into another massive challenge without catching her breath. That single decision captures the kind of season she's been putting together. Throughout 2026, she has completely ignored the typical script tennis hands to young rising players. Instead of banking one breakthrough and quietly building, she stacked one statement performance directly on top of another, to the point where even seasoned analysts have started admitting they underestimated exactly how fast she was improving. You could feel that shift in the air before she even hit a single practice ball in DC. American flags were everywhere. But another flag kept popping up again and again, the blue, red, white, and yellow of the Philippines, draped over fences, painted onto handmade signs, worn proudly on shirts by fans who had traveled hours just to watch a practice session. It felt less like Washington and more like a small piece of Manila had been temporarily relocated to the East Coast. If you've been following her journey even loosely, none of this comes as a surprise. Analysts covering the tour have openly said the level of buzz and support around her is something they genuinely haven't seen before. Some even say the attention she generates rivals or exceeds some of the top-ranked players in the world. That kind of statement doesn't get made lightly in a sport built on rankings and results. This surge traces back to her unforgettable run in Miami, after which every tournament brought bigger and louder crowds of Filipino supporters. Madrid turned into a celebration. Paris felt like a reunion. Berlin looked like a home game. Wimbledon pushed that energy to an entirely new level, with broadcast cameras repeatedly cutting to groups of fans singing, waving flags, and creating one of the most recognizable pockets of noise on the grounds. Washington becoming the next chapter feels inevitable, especially considering the DC metro area is home to one of the largest Filipino-American communities in the country. Families who had spent years hoping for a player capable of representing them on tennis's biggest stages finally got exactly that. And plenty of them had been telling friends and coworkers about her months before the rest of the world caught on. Now those predictions sound like they were simply ahead of schedule. This tournament isn't short on star power. Several top 20 players accepted invitations, turning the draw into one of the deepest of the season. Every round carries potential for a headline-worthy matchup. One name worth watching closely is Elena Svitolina, a player Eala beat convincingly during her grass court stretch in Berlin. Professional athletes rarely forget a loss like that. If the two cross paths again, revenge may be on Svitolina's mind. Numbers are hard to wrap your head around. Reports suggest roughly 11 million people back home tuned in to watch one of her matches, a figure almost unheard of for a tennis player at this stage. She reportedly has her own clothing line in the works along with favorable endorsement deals, including with Nike. Crowds show up like they're already emotionally invested in her career no matter where the tour goes. Washington's draw gets deeper with Marta Kostyuk, Naomi Osaka, Venus Williams, and defending champion Leylah Fernandez. For Eala, this isn't just another stop. It's a measuring stick, a real test of whether her game that dominated on clay and grass can translate to hardcourt. It's worth appreciating how fast this climb has been. Only 12 months ago, she was fighting to crack the top 140. Now she's walking into Washington with direct entry based purely on ranking. No wild cards, no favors. She earned every point. Every single point behind her ranking represents hours of training, sacrifice, and proof she belongs at this level. Her recent run reads almost like fiction. She took down Elena Rybakina on grass with composure far beyond her experience, and followed up by beating strong players like Svitolina. Wins like that stop being upsets. They become evidence of where her career is heading. The most telling moment didn't happen during a match. Afterward, standing in front of reporters, she said a tennis court is never the place to shrink yourself.